Every species has its rituals. Every military has its traditions. But only one rule is universal across the galaxy. At every war council, one chair must remain empty. Because if Earth arrives, that seat belongs to them and no one else. The Discovery Ambassador. Valorant stood at the entrance of the Supreme War Citadel and felt his breathing membranes tighten with nervousness. The structure before him was older than most civilizations. Its walls were built from compressed starlight, a technology that even the Zephyr Confederation had never mastered. This place had witnessed every major conflict in galactic history for the past 3,000 years. Today, Velrin would join the High Strategic Council for the first time. He was young for an ambassador, barely 200 cycles old. His scales still carried the bright silver coloring of youth, not yet dulled by age and experience. The Zephyr people were known for their diplomatic skills, but Velrin had risen faster than most. Some said it was talent. Others whispered it was luck. Velrin himself believed it was simply being in the right place when the council needed a new voice. The massive doors opened without sound. Velrin walked through corridors lined with memorial crystals. Each crystal contained the name of a species that had contributed to galactic defense. There were thousands of them, glowing softly in the dim light. He recognized many names. The Catherine warriors who held the line at Broken. Gate, the Silicate collective who sacrificed their homeworld to stop the Plague of Ash, the Luminar. Scouts who mapped enemy territory at the cost of their entire fleet. The council chamber itself was breathtaking. It was a perfect sphere, with the meeting table suspended in the center by gravitational manipulation. Around the walls, holographic displays showed every active military front across the galaxy. Velrin counted 47 conflicts currently being monitored. Some were small border disputes. Others were full-scale wars that had raged for decades. The table was enormous, designed to accommodate representatives from species of vastly different sizes and physiologies. Some seats were pools of liquid for aquatic beings. Others were pressure chambers for those who required different atmospheres. Some were simply empty spaces where incorporeal entities could manifest. Velrin found his designated seat, a standard platform adjusted for Zephyr physiology. As he settled in, he noticed something strange. Directly across from him was a chair unlike any other. It was simple, almost primitive in design, made from organic material that looked like processed wood. The craftsmanship was good but unremarkable compared to the advanced seating around it. What made it stand out was not its construction, but its condition and placement. The chair was immaculately maintained. Not a speck of dust rested on its surface. Next to it sat a crystal container filled with clear liquid, condensation forming on the outside indicating it had been placed recently. Beside the container was a small vessel holding a single flower. The petals were a deep crimson color that seemed to pulse with inner light. Velrin had never seen such a flower before, but the chair itself was empty. No ambassador sat there. No holographic projection indicated a remote presence. The space was simply vacant, yet it commanded attention. Every other seat was being filled as council members arrived, but no one moved toward that particular chair. More telling, no one even glanced at it. They walked around it, gave it space, treated it with a reverence that Velrin could not understand. The session began with standard reports. Admiral Thexis of the Catherine Empire detailed recent skirmishes along the neutral zone. Commander Synthesis reported on drone activity near the core worlds. Each presentation was thorough and professional. Velrin listened carefully, learning the rhythm and protocols of council proceedings. But his attention kept drifting back to the empty chair. During a brief recess, Velrin approached one of the senior council members, a being named Erixel from the Methane Collective. Erixel had served on the council for over 500 cycles and knew its traditions better than anyone. Honored Erixel, Velrin said respectfully. I have a question about protocol. The elder being's gaseous form shifted in acknowledgement. Ask, young ambassador. The chair across from my position. It appears to be maintained but unoccupied. Which species does it represent? Are they currently absent, or is this a memorial? The moment the words left his mouth, Velrin knew he had made a mistake. Erixel's form contracted sharply, a sign of distress among the methane collective. Around them, other council members who had overheard the question suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. The comfortable atmosphere of the recess evaporated. That question, Erixel said slowly, is one you should not have asked. Not here, not yet. I apologize if I have caused offense, Velrin replied quickly. I simply wish to understand. Understanding requires context, Erixel said. Context requires history. History requires pain. Are you certain you wish to pursue this knowledge? Velrin felt his scales ripple with confusion. It is simply a chair. Surely its story cannot be so terrible. The chair belongs to Earth, Erixel said quietly. And the story is not terrible. It is unbearable. Before Velrin could ask more, the session reconvened. For the rest of the meeting, he tried to focus on the discussions at hand. Trade route security, resource allocation, defense grid maintenance, standard matters that required attention but not deep thought. Yet his mind kept returning to Erixel's words. Earth, he knew the name. A minor world in a distant sector, home to a species called humans. They had been part of the galactic community briefly, centuries ago. Then they had withdrawn, closed their borders, and ceased all communication. The official records listed them as isolationist, but not hostile. Their territory was marked as restricted. No detailed explanation was given for why they had chosen seclusion. After the session ended, Velrin remained in the chamber. The other council members departed, but he sat studying the empty chair from a distance. A maintenance drone entered the room, floating on anti-gravity repulsors. It carried fresh water and a new flower. With careful precision, it replaced the old container and plant with new ones. The ritual was performed with more care than Velrin had ever seen a drone exhibit. Someone had programmed reverence into its basic functions. Velrin made a decision. He would not leave this mystery unsolved. If the council would not speak openly about Earth in this chair, then he would find answers elsewhere. The Citadel had archives, vast repositories of historical data. Somewhere in those records was the truth about what humans had done to earn such strange honor. He left the chamber and made his way to the information center. The archivist on duty was a silicate entity named Krister, whose body was literally made of organized data structures. Ambassador Velrin, Krister acknowledged. How may I assist you? I need access to historical records, Velrin said. Specifically, information about Earth and its relationship with the High Strategic Council. Krister's crystalline form flickered. That information is classified under Protocol 7. You would need special authorization to access it. I am a council member, Velrin pointed out. Surely that grants me sufficient clearance. Council membership grants access to current strategic data, Krister explained. Historical archives, particularly those involving species no longer active in council affairs, require separate authorization. You would need approval from at least 3 senior members. Velrin felt frustration building. The more barriers he encountered, the more determined he became. There was a story here, something important enough to maintain daily rituals for nearly 2 centuries. Something that made experienced diplomats uncomfortable with even simple questions. Is there any information about Earth that is not classified? He asked. Krister processed for a moment. Basic demographic and cultural data is available. Would you like to review it? Yes. What followed was disappointing. The available information was sparse. Earth was a planet in the Orion Arm, third from its star. Humans were carbon-based, bilaterally symmetrical, with relatively short lifespans. Their technology had been primitive when they first joined the galactic community. Their culture valued something called individualism, which the records noted made them difficult to predict in negotiations. There was nothing about wars, nothing about sacrifice, nothing that explained the empty chair. Velrin returned to his quarters that evening feeling more confused than when he had started. He stood at his window, looking out at the starfield. Somewhere out there was Earth, hidden behind closed borders and silence. A species that once sat at the council table, but did so no longer. A people who maintained an empty chair in their honor, yet no one would explain why. He activated his personal terminal and composed a message. Not to the archives or to Krister, but to an old friend. Mirex was a data specialist who worked in the lower levels of the Citadel, maintaining systems that most people never thought about. More importantly, Mirex owed Velrin a favor. The message was simple. I need information that official channels will not provide. Can you help? The response came within minutes. Depends on the information. What are you looking for? Everything about Earth. Everything about why they have a chair at the High Strategic Council, but no one will discuss them. There was a long pause before the next message arrived. You were asking about Protocol 7 material. That is dangerous territory, my friend. I need to know. Another pause. Then meet me in Archive Section 9 tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. And Velrin, be prepared. Some knowledge changes you forever. Velrin stared at the message. Part of him wanted to decline, to let the mystery remain unsolved. But a larger part, the part that had driven him to become an ambassador in the first place, could not let go. He had seen the reverence with which that chair was maintained. He had heard the pain in Erixel's voice. Whatever Earth had done, it mattered. It mattered deeply. He sent his confirmation. I will be there. That night, Velrin did not sleep. He lay in his rest chamber, his mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow he would learn the truth. Tomorrow he would understand why an empty chair held more power than most occupied seats. Tomorrow, everything would change. He did not yet know how right he was. The truth unveiled Archive Section 9 was located in the deepest level of the Supreme War Citadel, far below the gleaming council chambers and public halls. Velrin descended through maintenance corridors that few ambassadors ever saw. The walls here were bare metal, functional rather than decorative. The air tasted recycled and old. Mirex was waiting when Velrin arrived. The data specialist was a fragment, a species that existed as distributed consciousness across multiple small crystalline bodies. Currently, Mirex manifested as 7 floating crystals that orbited each other in complex patterns. You came? Mirex said, the voice emanating from the collective rather than any single crystal. I said I would, Velrin replied. Can you help me? I can show you what the archives contain, Mirex answered carefully. Whether that constitutes help remains to be seen. Follow me. They moved through rows of data storage units. Most were automated, requiring no physical maintenance. But this section was different. These archives were isolated from the main network, accessible only through direct connection. Security measure or deliberate obscurity, Velrin could not tell. Mirex led him to a terminal in a small alcove. This console has been dormant for decades. Most council members never think to look here. The information is not hidden. Exactly. It is simply not advertised. Why the secrecy? Velrin asked. Because shame is a powerful force, Mirex said. Even among civilizations that pride themselves on logic and reason. What you are about to learn is not classified to protect Earth. It is classified to protect everyone else. Mirex interfaced with the terminal, and data began to flow across the screen. Dates, reports, battle logs. Velrin recognized the format immediately. These were military records from a major conflict. 180 years ago, Mirex began, the galaxy faced what historians now call the Vexor Crisis. It was the closest we ever came to complete extinction. Images appeared on the screen. They showed something that made Velrin's scales contract in instinctive fear. The Vexor were not physical beings in any conventional sense. They were patterns, information viruses that could infect organic neural tissue. Once infected, a being became part of the Vexor collective, their consciousness consumed and repurposed. They appeared without warning, Mirex continued. One day, a research station went silent. When investigators arrived, everyone aboard had been converted. The Vexor spread through them, using their bodies as transmission vectors. Within weeks, entire colonies fell. Valerin watched footage of infected populations. They moved with unnatural coordination, their eyes empty of individual thought. The Vexer did not kill their hosts immediately. They used them, wore them like living tools, until the bodies broke down from exhaustion and neural damage. The High Strategic Council convened emergency sessions, Mirek said. Every military mind in the galaxy contributed to the analysis. The conclusion was unanimous and terrible. The Vexer could not be stopped conventionally. They spread too fast. They adapted to every defense we deployed. Quarantine was impossible because they could transmit through any form of communication, even simple radio waves. How did the galaxy survive? Valerin asked, though part of him already knew the answer. The council made a decision, Mirek said quietly. They identified 3 heavily populated sectors where Vexer infection was most concentrated. These sectors contained 42 inhabited worlds, billions of sentient beings. The plan was to seal those sectors completely, destroy all hyperspace lanes leading out, cut all communication, let the Vexer burn themselves out on the trapped populations, then contain the dead zones permanently. Valerin felt sick. They voted to abandon billions? They called it the Necessity Protocol, Mirek said. The mathematics were clear. Sacrifice 3 sectors to save 300. Mourn the losses, but accept them as the price of survival. The vote was scheduled for the next council session. The screen changed, showing the council chamber as it had looked 180 years ago. Valerin recognized many of the seats, though the beings occupying them were different. One seat, however, looked exactly the same. The simple wooden chair. Earth sent Ambassador Chun to that meeting, Mirek said. She was their representative, a former military commander who had transitioned to diplomatic service. By all accounts, she was respected but not particularly influential. Earth was a minor member, recent joiners with limited resources. The recording began to play. Valerin watched as one delegate after another stood to support the Necessity Protocol. The arguments were logical, backed by data and projections. Each speaker expressed regret, but maintained that there was no alternative. Then Ambassador Cheen stood. She was smaller than most beings in the chamber, her frame appearing fragile next to armored warriors and massive entities. But when she spoke, her voice carried absolute certainty. You are deciding who deserves to live and who deserves to die, she said. You are placing a value on consciousness, on life itself, and declaring that some beings matter less than others. I understand your mathematics. I have reviewed your projections, but I reject your conclusion. The chamber had erupted in protest. Delegates demanded to know what alternative she proposed. Ambassador Chen had looked at each of them in turn before answering. Humanity offers a different protocol, she said. We call it the Defiance option. We will deploy our entire defensive fleet to the threatened sectors. We will establish a psychological warfare grid using human neural patterns. The Vexer are information parasites. They infect through pattern recognition. But human consciousness is chaotic, contradictory, fundamentally irrational by computational standards. We believe this chaos can disrupt their infection vectors. You are proposing to use your people as bait, one delegate had said. Your neural patterns would expose your entire species to infection. Yes, Ambassador Chin had replied simply. That is exactly what we are proposing. Mirex paused the recording. The council thought she was insane. Humans numbered in the billions, but they were offering to risk their entire species for sectors they had no connection to. Worlds they had never visited. People they had never met. What happened? Varen asked, though his voice barely worked. Mirex resumed the playback. The council had argued for hours. They had offered Earth alternatives. Technology transfers, resource support, anything to dissuade them from this suicidal plan. Ambassador Chen had refused every offer. We did not join this council to calculate which lives are expendable, she had said. We joined because we believed in protecting all life. If that belief costs us everything, then we pay that price willingly. Because the alternative is to become the kind of species that abandons billions to save ourselves. We would rather die human than live as cowards. The vote had proceeded. 46 species supported the necessity protocol. One species opposed it. Earth stood alone. Ambassador Chen had walked out of the chamber and immediately issued orders to the human fleet. Every military vessel, every armed transport, every ship that could fight moved toward the threatened sectors. They arrived within days, establishing a perimeter around the infected zones. What followed was documented in painful detail. Human ships broadcast their neural patterns constantly, filling space with the chaotic signatures of human thought. Music, poetry, contradictory emotions, irrational hopes and fears. The Vexer, evolved to infect ordered minds, encountered something they could not process. The human patterns did not make sense to them, Mirix explained. Humans could hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously. They could feel hope and despair at the same moment. They could love and hate the same thing. Their neural architecture was fundamentally paradoxical. When the Vexer tried to infect humans, they became confused, fragmented. But the cost was devastating. The Vexer attacked relentlessly, trying to overwhelm the human defenses. Ship after ship fell. Crews were infected and had to be destroyed by their own allies. The psychological warfare worked, but it required humans to constantly expose themselves to infection vectors. Velrin watched battle footage. That made him want to look away, but could not. He saw human pilots ramming their fighters into Vexer-controlled vessels. He saw crews detonating their own ships to prevent infection spread. He saw soldiers holding position even as the neural virus ate into their minds, buying seconds for evacuation transports to escape. The siege lasted 43 days, Mirix said. By the end, 78% of the human forces were gone. Not retreated. Gone. Dead or infected and subsequently eliminated. But the Vexer collective fractured. The chaotic human patterns had corrupted their core intelligence. They began fighting themselves, unable to maintain cohesion. The screen showed the aftermath. The Vexer threat collapsed within days once their unity broke. The 42 worlds in the threatened sectors survived. Billions of beings lived because humans had refused to let them die. The council convened again immediately after the crisis ended, Mirix continued. They wanted to honor Earth, to offer reparations, to provide anything humanity needed to rebuild. Ambassador Chen had returned to the council chamber. Velrin watched as she stood before the assembled delegates, her uniform torn and stained, her face showing exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. "We do not want your honor," she had said. "We do not want your resources. We want one thing only. We want you to remember what you were willing to do. We want you to remember that you voted to abandon billions. We want you to remember that it took a minor species to show you what courage actually means." She had gestured to her empty chair. "Keep the seat. Maintain it. Let it remind you every single day of what you almost became. And perhaps someday you will become a council worthy of the name you claim." Then humanity had withdrawn. They closed their borders, recalled their ambassadors, and ceased all galactic participation. They rebuilt alone, refusing all assistance, determined to recover without compromising who they were. The council honored her request, Mirix said. They kept the seat. Fresh water symbolizes life that continues. The flower represents beauty that blooms even after death. Every council member who serves learns this story eventually, but most choose not to speak of it because speaking requires confronting what they almost did. Velrin sat in silence for a long time. The archive around him felt oppressively quiet. Finally, he spoke. "Where is Ambassador Chun now?" "She died 40 years after the crisis," Mirix said. "Natural causes. She lived long enough to see her people rebuild and flourish. Her final words are recorded in Earth's archives, though few outsiders know them. She said, 'We showed them what we are. Now they must decide what they want to be.'" Velrin stood slowly. His legs felt unsteady. Everything he thought he understood about the Council, about galactic civilization, had shifted. "Thank you for showing me this. Will you tell others?" Mirix asked. "I do not know," Velrin admitted. I need time to understand what this means. He left Archive Section 9 with his mind churning. The walk back to his quarters felt different now. Every corridor, every memorial crystal, every symbol of galactic unity seemed hollow, built on the memory of a decision that should never have been considered. When he reached his quarters, Velrin did not rest. He stood at his window, looking toward the distant stars, wondering which one was Earth's sun, wondering what humans thought of the galaxy that had abandoned them, that they had saved anyway. Tomorrow he would return to the council chamber. He would see that empty chair again, and now he would understand what it truly represented. Not absence, not memorial, but challenge. A question asked every day to every delegate who entered that room. Are you better today than you were yesterday? Are you worthy of the sacrifice made for you? Velrin did not yet know his answer. But he knew he would spend the rest of his life trying to earn one. The legacy lives on. Velrin did not sleep that night. He could not. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the battle footage from the Vexor crisis. Human ships burning, crews sacrificing themselves. Ambassador Chen standing alone against an entire council that had chosen fear over courage. When dawn came, he prepared himself carefully. Today's council session would be different. Today he carried knowledge that changed everything. The council chamber looked the same as always. The same holographic displays showing current conflicts. The same delegates taking their seats. The same empty chair with its fresh water and crimson flower. But Velrin saw it all differently now. Every seat represented a species that had voted to abandon billions. Every comfortable position was built on shame they preferred not to acknowledge. He took his place and waited. The session began with routine matters. Trade disputes, resource allocation, border patrol schedules. Velrin participated minimally, his mind elsewhere. He was waiting for the right moment, though he did not yet know when that would be. The moment came 2 hours into the session. Admiral Thexus stood to present a tactical situation that required council attention. A new threat had emerged at the galactic rim. The Void Collective, a machine intelligence that had been dormant for millennia, had awakened. Their ships had already consumed 7 uninhabited systems, breaking down planets for raw materials. Projections indicate they will reach populated space within 6 standard months, Admiral Thexus said. His voice was steady, professional. We must decide how to respond. The discussion that followed was depressingly familiar to Velrin. Delegates proposed defensive perimeters. They calculated which sectors were most valuable to defend. They discussed acceptable casualty rates and resource expenditures. The mathematics flowed smoothly, coldly, just as they had 180 years ago. Commander Synthesis from the Silicate Collective presented her analysis. The border worlds in the projected path number 17. Total population, approximately 40 million. Evacuation would be costly and logistically complex. Defense would require committing 70% of our available fleet with high probability of losses. What are the alternatives? Asked Representative Rixel. We could establish a containment line further inward, Commander Synthesis said. Sacrifice the border worlds to buy time for evacuation of more densely populated sectors. The mathematics favor this approach. We save more lives overall. There it was. The same logic. The same cold calculation. Sacrifice the few to save the many? Velrin felt something break inside him, or perhaps it was something finally coming together. He stood. Every delegate turned to look at him. Young ambassadors rarely interrupted tactical discussions. But Velrin was no longer concerned with protocol. I have a question, he said. His voice was steady despite his racing hearts. What would Earth do? The chamber went silent. The kind of silence that has weight and texture. Several delegates looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. Admiral Dexis's face showed something that might have been pain. Ambassador Velrin, Orixel said carefully. That is not a productive line of inquiry, is it not? Velrin asked. He walked toward the center of the chamber, toward the empty chair. We maintain this seat daily. We place fresh water and living flowers. We honor the species who once sat here. But do we honor what they taught us? Or do we simply honor the memory while ignoring the lesson? You are new to this council, Admiral Thexus said. You do not understand the complexities involved in these decisions. I understand that 180 years ago, this council voted to abandon 42 worlds, Valrin said. The words fell like stones. I understand that billions of beings were deemed acceptable losses. I understand that one species, one minor species with limited resources, stood alone and said no. You have been accessing restricted archives, Commander Synthesis said. Her crystalline body flickered with what might have been embarrassment. I have been learning history, Valrin corrected. History that apparently most of you would prefer to forget. But you cannot forget it. That is why this chair remains. Ambassador Chen made sure of that. He placed his hand on the back of the empty chair. She told you to remember what you almost became. She gave you a chance to be better. And now, 180 years later, you are making the same decision. Different threat, different worlds, but the same cold mathematics that values some lives over others. Representative Erixel's gaseous form contracted. The situations are not comparable. The Vexor crisis was unique. Every crisis is unique, Velrin said. That is not the point. The point is how we respond to them. Do we respond with calculation, deciding which beings are expendable? Or do we respond with the courage that Earth showed us? Courage does not change tactical reality, Admiral Thexus said. But his voice lacked conviction. Courage changes everything, Velrin replied. Earth proved that. They faced impossible odds with inferior technology and shorter lifespans. They should have lost. The mathematics said they would lose. But they won because they refused to accept that any life was expendable. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate who would hold his gaze. I am ashamed. Ashamed that my people sat in this chamber and voted to abandon billions. Ashamed that I might have done the same if I had been here. But I am more ashamed that we learned nothing, that we kept the chair but ignored what it represents. What are you proposing? Commander Synthesis asked quietly. I propose we stop calculating acceptable losses, Velrin said. I propose we defend all 17 border worlds. I propose we commit whatever resources are necessary, accept whatever risks are required, and refuse to abandon anyone. Not because the mathematics favor it. Not because it is efficient, but because it is right. You are asking us to risk everything, Admiral Thexus said. Yes, Velrin agreed. Just as Earth did. They risked their entire species for people they did not know. Can we not risk our fleets for our own people? The silence stretched. Velrin saw conflict on every face. They knew he was right. They had always known. But knowing and acting are different things, thought it was Erixel who spoke first. The ancient being's form expanded, filling more space than usual. When Erixel spoke, the voice carried centuries of regret. I was here, Erixel said. 180 years ago, I voted for the necessity protocol. I voted to abandon 42 worlds because the mathematics said we should. And I have lived with that shame every day since. Erixel moved toward the empty chair. Ambassador Chun looked at me when she left this chamber. I have never forgotten that look. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was disappointment. She was disappointed that we had chosen mathematics over morality. The old being turned to face the council. Ambassador Velrin is correct. We have honored the memory but ignored the lesson. We have maintained this chair as a symbol while remaining unchanged as a council. That ends now. Erixel raised appendages in formal voting position. I vote to defend all 17 border worlds. No calculations. No acceptable losses. We stand for every life. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Commander Synthesis stood. I vote with Erixel. We defend everyone. Admiral Thexus stood next. My people died fighting alongside humans during the Vexor crisis. They would be ashamed if I voted otherwise. We defend everyone. One by one, delegates rose. The Catherine representative? The Luminar ambassador? The Methane collective? Species that had voted for abandonment 180 years ago now voted for courage. The transformation swept through the chamber like light breaking through darkness. When the vote concluded, it was unanimous. Every species committed to defending the border worlds. No calculations of acceptable loss. No compromise with principle. Velrin felt something he had not expected. Hope. Hope that the galaxy could become what Earth had believed it should. B. We must inform Earth of this decision, Commander Synthesis said. They should know that their lesson was finally learned. Earth has been isolated for nearly 2 centuries, Admiral Fexa said. They may not respond to our communication. Then we send it anyway, Orixel said. They deserve to know. The message was composed carefully. It explained the new crisis, the Council's decision, and why it mattered. It acknowledged the shame of the past and the hope for the future. It was addressed to no specific authority, simply to Earth itself. 3 days later, a response arrived. The Council reconvened to hear it. The message was audio only, a human voice speaking words that crossed 180 years of silence. This is Director Sarah Shen of the Earth Defense Initiative. We received your message. We acknowledge your decision regarding the border worlds. It took you long enough. There was a pause, then the voice continued with something that might have been warmth. My great-grandmother was Ambassador Chen. She believed the galaxy could learn. She believed you could become better than you were. I am pleased to see she was correct. Another pause. You asked for our help with the Void Collective. Under normal circumstances, we would decline. Earth does not involve itself in galactic affairs. But these are not normal circumstances. You have finally honored the lesson we tried to teach. That deserves recognition. We will send a support fleet, not to save you. You do not need saving. We will send it to stand beside you, as equals, as people who share the same principles. That is all we ever wanted. The message ended. The chamber remained quiet for a long moment. Then slowly applause began. Not the formal acknowledgement of diplomatic achievement, but genuine appreciation, relief, joy. Velrin walked to the empty chair after the session ended. He picked up the crystal container and refreshed the water himself. He replaced the crimson flower with his own hands. The ritual felt different now. Not obligation, but honor. Not shame, but determination. Thank you, he whispered to the empty chair. Thank you for not giving up on us. In the weeks that followed, the combined galactic fleet mobilized. Earth sent 12 ships, small vessels by galactic standards, but crewed by humans who carried 180 years of isolated determination. They fought alongside species that their ancestors had saved, defending worlds that no one was willing to abandon. The battle against the Void Collective was hard. Casualties were significant, but no one suggested retreat. No one proposed sacrifice. The Council had finally learned what Ambassador Chen tried to teach them. Victory came after 6 months of continuous engagement. The Void Collective was pushed back beyond the galactic rim. All 17 border worlds survived. Not one life was deemed acceptable loss. When it ended, the Earth fleet prepared to return home. Director Chen sent a final message to the Council. You did well. You have become what we hoped you would be. The chair can remain empty. Its work is done. But keep it anyway. Keep it as a reminder not of shame, but of growth. Keep it as proof that even the oldest civilizations can learn. Keep it because it represents the best version of who you can be. Velrin read those words standing beside the empty chair. He understood now that it would always remain empty. Not because Earth refused to return, but because its purpose was different. The chair was not a seat for a delegate. It was a teacher for all delegates. A constant reminder of the difference between mathematics and morality. Between calculation and courage, he placed fresh water and a new flower, then stepped back. Other delegates had begun doing the same, taking turns with the daily ritual. Each one spent a moment in silence before that empty chair, remembering the lesson, renewing their commitment to be worthy of it. The galaxy continued its endless dance of conflicts and cooperation, trade and diplomacy, peace and war. But something had changed. Something fundamental. The High Strategic Council now asked different questions when faced with difficult decisions. Not what can we afford to lose, but what are we willing to fight for? Not who is expendable, but who are we if we choose expediency over principle. And in a distant system. On a small blue world, humans looked up at the stars. They had rebuilt their civilization. They had flourished in isolation. They had remained true to who they were. Even when it would have been easier to change, they did not know all the details of what had happened at the Galactic Council. They did not know about Valrun's speech or the unanimous vote or the shift in thinking that had finally occurred. But they would have smiled if they knew, because that was all they had ever wanted. Not gratitude, not payment, not even recognition. Just for the galaxy to learn what courage really means. Just for civilizations to understand that some things matter more than mathematics. Just for the lesson to take root and grow. The empty chair remained in the council chamber. It would remain there forever, maintained daily, honored constantly, not as a memorial to absence, but as a celebration of presence. A reminder that the smallest voice can change the largest institution. That principle can defeat calculation. That courage is contagious, and that sometimes. The most powerful seat at any table is the one that remains empty. Teaching lessons that full seats never could. Valrun served on the High Strategic Council for another 300 cycles. He eventually became its senior member, guiding younger delegates as Erixel had once guided him. And every single day, without fail, he walked to that empty chair. He refreshed the water. He replaced the flour. And he asked himself the question that Ambassador Chen had left behind. Am I better today than I was yesterday? Am I worthy of the sacrifice made for me? Some days the answer was yes. Some days it was no. But he asked the question every day for the rest of his life, and that perhaps was the greatest lesson Earth had taught them all, not to be perfect, but to try, to keep trying, to never stop asking what kind of civilization they wanted to be. The empty chair stood silent, as it always would. But its silence spoke louder than any voice ever could. And the galaxy, finally, was listening.